Hey there, music lovers. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for dropping by and taking time out of your day to watch this video. Back in May, I did a video called Do Stop Believin'. It was about Steve Perry because, there have been many, many years of just wondering what the hell is up with Steve Perry. Little sightings here and there, making an appearance, showing up at a ball game, and then he gets up on stage finally in 2014. He performs with the Eels. It's like, what the hell is up with performing with the Eels? Why them? And then there's, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He shows up. People hadn't seen him in such a long time. He gives a great speech, but he doesn't perform with Journey. Then he shows up at American Idol, and that's when I made the video. It's like, all right, come on, come on. What's going on here, Steve? Are you ever going to put out this music? And so there were a lot more questions than there were answers. And so this video is kind of an update to that video because one of the things that I said in that was, he either can't do it or he doesn't want to do it. And I think we've answered the question that he can do it. There's no question about it that Steve Perry can sing. It's just been that he just didn't feel like it was the right time. He didn't want to do it. He didn't feel like he was really ready for it. But as I'm sure you all know, Steve Perry is back. Finally, we have Bigfoot has arrived. The guy that we've been wondering about is now suddenly all over the news. And, we've gone from traces of him to now he's all over the place. He's face to face. He's giving interviews on the radio. It's going to be on CBS Sunday morning. I mean, now he's on the radio. He's got a brand new song, new album coming out on October the 5th called Traces. And so we're learning a lot about Steve now. We're getting answers to a lot of questions. Questions about, why did he walk away? Why did he walk away from Journey? Why did he walk away from performing? And, why didn't he perform with Journey? Would he ever go back to Journey? How is his voice? That and so many other questions. And this is the first time that Steve is actually doing interviews like this on this kind of real personal level. Even back in the day, he wasn't giving these types of interviews. So it's really been a revelation, not only for us, but for Steve too. And we've gotten to learn a lot about where he's been. Yeah, I mean, how many other artists can you think of that went away for 20 years and then they pop back up again? And, artists that have sold millions of albums, and when they come back 20 years later, there are millions of fans that are waiting, that have been wondering and have been talking. And I talked about Bigfoot. It's almost like he's been on Frozen and he's now in the digital age because we didn't have a lot of this stuff when he was on the scene last time in the late 90s. The internet was just kind of gearing up, and we have a whole social media thing now. And so the frenzy of, sharing music and sharing interviews and the information age and everything, it's almost like, he's kind of entering this new world in a lot of different ways. But I was trying to think of other artists that have ever done something like that before. I thought of maybe like Meatloaf. He was popular in the 70s, came back again in the 90s. But he had been around. He was putting albums out. Nobody gave a shit and nobody bought them. But still, like Roy Orbison maybe. He was a guy that came back again strong after being away for many, many years. But again, he was still around. He was making albums that nobody was buying. But very rare that you have a case like Steve Perry where they're just gone totally. So anyway, why did Steve Perry walk away from it all? Why did he give up success and celebrity? He basically felt like he was a dried sponge, as he put it. He was burned out. He just had lost the passion and the desire to write and record music. He just wanted to go and live a very private life. He felt like living off of applause and adoration and the drug-like, effect that you get from people cheering you and just loving you for what you've accomplished was just not for him. And he just wanted to go back home and live a normal life. And for him, having fun and having an enjoyable day meant, getting on his motorbike and going down a back road. That to him, just feeling the wind in his hair kind of thing was enough. And that's what he wanted to get back to. He needed to feel like, life itself was enough. And so, many, many years went by. And he was feeling good. He was kind of feeling like, you know what, if this never happens, if I never go back to writing and recording again, then that's perfectly fine. About 2011 is when he met this woman named Kelly Nash, and she was struggling with breast cancer. At that time, he knew it, but he fell in love with her. It says a lot about him, that he would enter into a relationship that he knew was going to be ending sooner than later. And they were inseparable. He was so encouraged by her strength, because you could imagine a guy like Steve Perry, anybody could tell him, "Oh, I love you, Steve," and you don't know what their intentions are, and if it's genuine. But he really felt for the first time that he had someone that really loved him for who he was, because she didn't have much. And she actually, wanted to see him get out there and perform again. And she made him promise her that when she passed away, that he would not become a recluse and become isolated. She wanted him to go out there. That's one of the reasons why he's here now, is because he, made a promise and he wanted to keep it. And, after he grieved her, because she passed away not too long after that, in 2012, he went through a grieving process as anybody would. It really, really gutted him. And, he started to feel the passion again. He started to feel the inspiration. He had written songs. Actually, before he met Kelly, he had started to write songs. And so he had songs that he wrote before he met her, stuff that he was writing during. And eventually he built a studio in his house. And he started to gradually just take these baby steps, piece by piece, working on these songs. And that's kind of where he is now, is he just got to a point where he felt like, you know what, it's time. It's time for me to start to get back out there. He started to feel the passion. He wanted to perform again, and he wanted to put an album out. And I kind of get the feeling from the way he's been talking that this is a long-term thing for him. This is not, I'm going to put this album out and then I'm going to go fade away for another 10 or so years. It seems like the beginning of him getting out there again. Another question was, why didn't he perform a Journey at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Because you may recall he shows up, and this is the first time we're seeing him on stage with Journey in a long, long time. I think the last time he had joined them for anything was when they got their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But in this scenario, he had the stage. He could have performed with them, and he chose not to. And there were many who kind of speculated, myself included, that maybe he couldn't sing. Maybe he just felt like he couldn't do it, because we really hadn't heard him sing a whole lot. We did with the Eels when he performed with them in 2014, and we noticed that he dropped the key. And, he didn't really do anything that was too out there. He kind of kept it very safe. And so there was a lot of questions as to whether or not he could even do it. And so the real reason is just because that's not his band now. And he felt like Arnell is the singer and he's the one that should be fronting them, and he's done with them. He was recently asked if he would ever get back with them in any way. And it was kind of interesting. When the interviewer asked him that, she said something to the effect of, it's kind of like maybe going back with an ex-spouse or something. And Steve said to her, well, let me ask you, how would you feel about doing that? And she answered, well, I probably wouldn't want to, because I've moved on with my life and I've kind of learned from that whole experience and I'm better for it. And he was like, exactly. So he didn't even have to give the answer, but you could read between the lines that he's done with Journey. He's moved on. He's much better for it. And he really just wants nothing to do with them. So I don't want to hear anybody saying, is he going to get back? Maybe he's going to get back. All right, he's not going to get back, okay? Do stop believing that Steve Perry will rejoin Journey. I don't see that ever happening. Now, I could see him possibly doing something with Neil Schon down the road. Neil has indicated that he would love to work with Steve, And I think right now Steve is in Steve world. He's doing his own thing, and he needs to. This is all a part of him finding his feet again. And I don't see him doing any kind of a collaboration with anybody in any major way now. But down the road, maybe he will work with Neil and do something. But for right now, it's the Steve Perry show, okay? So then there's also questions about his voice, and can he sing? Can he still hit the high notes? And of course, we know that he can sing because he's got this brand new song out, which I'm going to get to here in just a bit. But yes, he can sing, and he fully realizes that when he was in Journey, he was hitting some stratospheric highs, and there's a reason for that. Of course, one of the things that we don't really talk about, that you don't hear a lot about because we've moved on from it, is that, back in the 80s, there was a competition for, who could sound like they got their balls in a vice more than the other guy. You had bands like Toto and Survivor, and these guys sang really, really high. And so Steve Perry, he's a competitor, and that's the name of the game. You want to sell more albums, you want to be like impressive and hit these high notes. And so Steve would just, Steve just had the tools, he had the pipes, and he used them, and he pushed them as much as he possibly could. Maybe that's why he's got such a raspy voice now. It's just because he really, he used those tools so much when he was younger, and you just can't. It's very hard to keep doing that, especially when you're 70 years old, right? So something's got to give. Luckily, he still has a great voice. He really, really does, but he even knows now that he can't hit those really, really highs. And so he said, look, if I can't get there, I'll drop the key down a bit. But it sounds like he feels confident that he can still sing a lot of those songs. And if he can't hit those exact highs, he can still do it in a respectable way. And then, of course, there's the question of, are you going to perform again? Are you going to do a tour? And his answer to that so far has been, look, I'm doing this album now. I'm doing press. I'm doing interviews. This is baby steps here. He would like to perform. There's been talk about getting that kind of thing going, but it doesn't sound to me like he has any solid thing on who he would tour with, like who his band members would be, or what kind of a set that he would do. From what I can tell, a lot of it is still up in the air, and so I don't look to see him doing anything live anytime real soon. Definitely not this year, I don't think. I think if you do see him do any kind of tour, more than likely it'll be sometime next year. I would think. If you got a new album coming out in October, typically I've seen a lot of bands put an album out, like in the fall or the winter, and then maybe next spring or summer they could pull it off. Steve could pull it off. I mean, let's face it, Steve could tour anytime he wants to. He's going to have a crowd waiting there. But ideally, he probably will be on the road at some point next year, and it might be very, very limited. He might start off doing a few shows, kind of like how Dennis DeYoung did, when he started putting himself back out there again. You don't want to burn yourself out. You kind of want to find your footing and all that. So look for that. That's what I think. So anyway, he's got this new album coming out on October the 5th, his first solo album in about almost 25 years. His last one was For the Love of Strange Medicine. That was out in 94. And this new album, the cover looks pretty interesting. It looks like there's a lot of things going on in there. Because the album's called Traces, there's like an amusement park in there, there's a dog in there, there's like a guitar. It seems to me like this is like looking back over his life, things that meant a lot to him, just traces of various things that have left their mark, that he could go back to, that remind him of people and places in his life. I can relate to that kind of thing. I remember not too long ago, I was walking down a street where I used to live, a street that used to have, like over there was my friend lived there. I had my grandparents lived there. My aunt and uncle lived there. One of my best friends there. And we used to own this street. We played ball over here, and we'd stay up till midnight until our parents called us home. And I walk up the street now, and there's like nobody is there anymore. Like everybody's gone. It's like a ghost town, but the homes are still there. The lot where we played ball is still there. And so it's almost like a bittersweet kind of walk through the past, and that's kind of what I get the feeling that this Trace's album cover is. You know, there's just things that remind him of the way things used to be, and this album is going to be kind of a mixture of some different styles. You know, there's going to be, of course, some ballads, some softer rock. He's going to have some R&B influenced stuff. There's going to be some rock stuff on there. He's got some pretty interesting guests. He's got like, I think he said Steve Ferroni is going to be playing drums on some of it. Vinnie Colaiuta, who has played with Frank Zappa. I think he's played with Sting. He's a great, great drummer. Looking forward to hearing that. John Five, who is a guitarist, used to play with Marilyn Manson. I think he's with Rob Zombie now. He's on there too. So there's some interesting players that are going to be on this album to kind of round things out. He does a Beatles cover, this Beatles track called I Need You, which is a song that George Harrison wrote. And Steve Perry always heard this song differently. And so I think he's going to put more of like an R&B kind of a spin on it. The album is going to be filled with songs that are, upbeat and happy. There might be a couple of songs that are a bit, like reflective of the loss of his girlfriend Kelly. But I think for the most part, it's going to be a very happy kind of album. And I think it's kind of a cathartic kind of experience for him. And I should also mention too that this album is going to come out with some bonus tracks. The album as it is 10 songs, but Target has this exclusive. Target, for those of you who live in other countries, Target is a department store here in the States, kind of like a Walmart, and they're going to have an exclusive on this. You tend to see that from time to time. These stores, they sign these exclusive agreements with bands, and only they can sell it. I think that's a lot of bullshit. I say just put the damn thing out and give it to the fans, give it to as many as you can. But that's the way it is here. That's just the way it goes. But anyway, Target's going to have an exclusive version of this album with 5 bonus tracks. So there's going to be 15 brand new Steve Perry songs coming out. And like I said, that album comes out on October the 5th. Anyway, there's a brand new single called No Erasin that just came out. And it's got a video too. It's the first track on the album. And the song is about a high school reunion. And it's about these, these two that basically, I guess they were an item back in high school, and they start talking and they wind up in the back seat of a car again like they used to. And I guess the lesson here is, if your spouse or your partner is going to a high school reunion, you better go with them, okay? Because you don't want this kind of thing happening, right? So anyway, this song is very much I don't know what you want to call it, like an adult contemporary, kind of an upbeat, soft rock kind of song. And I'll be honest with you, I think the song is okay. It's not blowing me away. It's not the best thing I've ever heard. Knowing what Steve Perry is capable of, I think he's done much, much better. Like, I think that You Better Wait is much better. And I'm not saying this just because it's like a soft rock kind of song, because I got to tell you, something like Foolish Heart, which was on Street Talk, I think that's an amazing song. I think that's a very beautifully written song. It's not about that. It's just that the song has got a great hook in it. I've listened to this song probably a dozen times just to make sure I was hearing everything. It's very, very hooky. It'll stick in your head. It's just that it's not, to me, it's just not a song that I would put on, and listen to like I would, some of his other stuff. And I'm not saying it's a bad song. I just think it's an okay song. It doesn't really just totally knock me on my ass or anything. But I could imagine that the diehard Steve Perry fans out there are eating this up. And just so you know, I'm not a diehard Steve Perry fan. I love Steve. I think his best stuff was when he was with Journey. I love him when he's collaborating with others. I think that brings, the best out of him. I do like some of his solo stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a diehard fan. I love every single thing he's ever done. That's not me. I'll always shoot you straight. I'll tell you this, though. the video that goes along with it, it's good to see him again. That's one of the greatest things. He sounds good, and he's looking good too. And in the video, he seems to be happy, and he's not doing anything crazy. He's acting his age, and that's always good to see. But one thing is for sure, it is really, really cool to see Steve Perry back again. And I'm sure many of you would agree. It's, like I said earlier, it's like Bigfoot is all of a sudden giving interviews now. Hey, Bigfoot, was that you I saw on that camping trip back in 1986? I don't know. It's just quite amazing that he's back, and he's back in a major way. He's not just, kind of like, it reminds me of like David Bowie. He put an album out and then he would do no interviews. Like, just here's some brand new stuff. Like, he slipped it under the door, and it's like, I'm not saying nothing. I'm not talking nothing. Of course, David Bowie had his own reasons. He was sick, and he just preferred to stay out of the limelight. But it's great to see Steve. He's back. He's doing interviews like he's never done before. I'm going to put a link to some interviews down below. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put a link to the brand new song and some other goodies for you. So check that out. I really am interested in hearing, what you think about all this stuff. What do you think about Steve Perry coming back? What do you think about this new tune? Do you think he'll get back with Journey again? You think he'll work with Neil? There are more, I think, answers now than there are questions, I think. So let me know. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Just because, it might help another Steve Perry fan see it. That's the way it kind of works with those thumbs up. And also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and comment. And hey, I'll have another video soon, all right? Talk to you later.